Greetings and welcome back to a weekend rant. And it has been a couple of weeks. Folks, I will not do a rant if I really have nothing to talk about in rant style. So I'm not going to waste your time and I'm not going to make something up. So a couple of weeks are going to go by. However, I got one for tonight. It is kind of night. Okay. My parents both have passed away. 2008, my mom went. 2000. So then my dad, this may not be relevant to the story. So let's just say 2014, dad goes. All right. Two different illnesses got him. He had two different types of illnesses and they both brought him down. And he gets cremated and he lived in Florida but we brought his ashes up here because the family has a family plot up here in the New York area region. For some forsaken reason, and he was buried, so we had that everybody goes out, you follow the cars, you get out, you go over there and they dig the hole and they put him in the hole and then you put the flowers and they say a couple of prayers. And I think most of us here are familiar with that process, no matter what faith you are. I think they pretty much do the same thing in all the faiths. And I'm not going to say all the faiths do the same thing. And I know there's other ways of doing things, but let's just say predominantly that's the trend, that tradition. Okay. That was 2014, and it is now 2026. So we're talking 12 years ago. Over the last 12 years, I have gone to visit my parents' gravesite. And in 2015 or 2016, noticed something that I never noticed before, that his name, my father, which I will not mention, his name was not engraved on the tombstone. My mother is engraved, and my maternal grandmother, my mom's mom, is engraved there. And I'm like, where's dad? And I never noticed it. Now, mind you, for those who know that I'm in recovery, I didn't get sober until 2015. So there was the year after my father died that I got sober. I don't remember the burial whatsoever. I do not remember being there. I don't remember much of it because I was most likely three sheets to the wind, as they say. So at 2015 and 16, I'm looking at it and I'm like, then I'm starting to try to figure out who was in charge of this. So I know who the estate, who's the guy that the executor of the will, executor of the estate, whoever he is it his responsibility? And, or does it say it in the will? I don't have these answers. So I start calling my siblings and other people in the family. Hey, you guys know dad's name is not on his tombstone. And I'm only going to say this a little bit, and I don't want to make a big deal about it, but he was kind of a big deal in the town he worked and lived. He was a doctor, and he was very well known and very well liked and very well respected. And I was flabbergasted that this man, who, while he and I may not have been the tightest and the closest, he was a good father. He sent me to good schools, bailed me out of some nasty situations, and he took care of me. No, we didn't go baseball games and we didn't play catch. And I can remember flying a kite with him. I can remember sailboating with him because that was his thing. I can remember him showing me how to collect stamps and put them in a book. And oh my God, that was so fucking boring. And I'm talking about when I'm 8 years old, but he did what he wanted to do, his hobby. He wanted to show me. Yes, when I was 6, 7, he bought me a train set, like a Lionel, and we're talking back in the 60s. So, not the little craps you get from China today, but with the real nice whatever. Okay. I'm just trying to talk about that. I'm a little upset that his name is not on the tombstone. So I go on a tear and I call everybody, and everybody's pointing the finger at everybody else. At that time, I didn't have the information as to how to even do this if I wanted to take on the responsibility myself. And you'll understand why when I get to the real rant. Here it is. So every year, same thing. I go, I take a picture, I send the tombstone to everybody, and go, okay, guys, why not? Why isn't it done? And it's just kind of a couple of chit chats back and forth, and it just dies away. No pun intended. So whatever. 26. A member of my family, a cousin, came forward and said, I understand that your dad's name is not on there, and I would like to pay for it and have it done. And it was like a surprise and came from somebody that was close with my dad. So it makes sense. So he went to the cemetery and he went and found the people that kind of do that, the people that do gravestone engravings, and got a price, got a quote. I went to the cemetery and said, we'd like to do this. And the cemetery was actually the people who do the engraving go there because they know all these engravers know all the cemetery. That's where they work. I get a phone call 2 weeks ago from my cousin, and he said to me, blah, 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 doing the tombstone, and I'm going to pay for it. But we have a little problem. The name on the plot is not in your father's name. It is in your grandfather's name on your mother's side, the maiden name of my mom. And even though I am a surviving kin living as a grandson, they wouldn't acknowledge me. They needed the next of kin, meaning, so my grandfather, who owns that plot, they needed his next of kin, who is my mother, to authorize the engraving. She's dead. Sorry, Mom. She has passed in 2008. We told them that, and she's in that plot. So I was like, go look at your records and you'll see she's can't sign the affidavit because she's in the ground. Well, then to get a copy of the deed and transfer it to me, they needed all sorts of they wanted I don't remember, but they wanted death certificates and birth certificates and all sorts of IDs and $375 in fees and office whatever. And it got ridiculous. And then we had a family dinner 2 weeks ago. And it was a big family dinner. We had, I don't mean like a couple of us got together. We got the whole family together. It was arranged about a month or two in advance, and people could fly in from everywhere. And I would say about 60 people were there, and not the entire family, but those who could make it. So at this family dinner, the topic came up of my dad and the gravestone, what the problem was. And somebody came up to me and said, hey, go to the mortuary of where he was memorialized, the funeral home, that they would have a copy of the deed to the cemetery because that's the transfer. So it goes death certificate, hospital, and then transfer to the funeral home, then they keep a copy or they keep the original, whatever, and then it goes to the cemetery. But they have to have all that paperwork because they're part of it. Next morning, I called them, and it's ironic because I know the family that used to own that funeral home because I went to school with them because they're in that part of that. So it's a Catholic funeral home. It's in a Catholic church, cathedral. It's a diocese. I'm not going to get specific, but it's a big deal. And oh my God, sure enough, I get on the phone and I speak to this gentleman and I tell him who I am. And he's like, okay, yeah, I've heard of your name. And I told him, he says, hold on. And he, no, I don't know if he said, hold on. He said, give me a number. I'll call you back. And like 2 or 3 hours later, he calls me back and he says, I have your father's deed to the plot. I have the actual original copy of the plot. And I said, wait a minute, my dad? I said, because I was told it was under my mother's father's name. He bought the plot. And he said, look, this is all I have. I'd be more than happy to send it to you. So I said, please, whatever you got, send it to me. 3 days later in the mail, I get from 1961, which is when a plot was purchased at this cemetery. It was typewritten, typewriter. Remember what a typewriter is? Or for those who maybe younger don't know what a typewriter is, it's the old way we used to word process. Okay, whatever. And in handwriting, the cash receipt, COD, they paid $175 for that plot. I was like, because I don't imagine what it costs today. Everything was handwritten, but it was stamped and it was notarized and it was official. So I called up my cousin and I called up the people at the memorial and I say, hey, there is the plot is in my father's name, not my grandfather's name. So I don't know what the cemetery is trying to pull here by telling you it's in my grandfather's name. It's in my father's name. I'm looking at the original paperwork from 1961. And my grandmother on my mother's side, or my mother's mother passed away in 1961. And that's the year the plot was bought. So it makes sense that I guess my dad bought the plot, which didn't make sense because Grandpa lived in that town and built the house that I grew up in, but he moved after his wife passed away. If they're going to put my grandmother there, why would they put it in my father's name? So I give all this information to the engraver. And the engraver takes this information. By the way, I made scans and I sent it to him so he can see what I'm talking about. He takes it to the cemetery and cemetery says, no, this is for plot 130. Your father is in 128. So it's the next plot over. I'm leaving out the details like section, rows, and even the cemeteries. So they can rest in peace. I'm like, what? So you're telling me that the family has 2 plots next to each other? And I'm being told, yes, your father bought one and your grandfather bought one next to each other. So at that time, I was the only one born, but after that, my 3 sisters came, and I guess whatever other family they thought might come, either grandchildren or whatever, could all be buried in these 2 plots, depending on how deep you can bury and if you're cremated. Blew me away because I had no idea that there were 2 plots. There was nothing in the will. There was nothing said at the cemetery. At least I don't remember. Nobody in the family seems to remember 2 plots. And so I said I called the cemetery this afternoon and I said, so this thing about my grandfather owning that first plot and my father owns the second plot, he should be buried in the plot that he bought. And they said, "No, he's buried in the grandfather's plot." And I said, "That wouldn't make sense because on the deed it says I am to be buried in plot 130. Why did you bury him in 128? The one next to it under my grandfather's name, the one my grandfather bought, the one that you will not give me the rights to engrave. They will not let us engrave the tombstone in 128 without proof that I am a relative and that I am the next living kin. They want my dead grandfather to sign some affidavit. Not happening. But more importantly, why is my father in the other grave, the other plot? He should be in his plot. And why isn't there a tombstone in plot 130? Because as far as any of us know, we don't even look there. Because when I go to visit, I'm thinking this is the family plot, 128. I'm standing there. I see my mom's name. I see my grandmother's name. I don't see dad's name. But I'm not thinking that right to the right, there's another plot. I never looked there. I don't know what's there. I don't know if there's a headstone there or if it's just a blank spot. I can't remember. It's been a while. I'll be honest. It's probably about 2 years since I've been there. It's a little bit of a drive, and I'm just haven't been there. Okay. And this is even worse. This is the day after Mother's Day, and I didn't even go. Okay, but I had a crazy day yesterday. All right. So I guess I'll wrap it up. But here's the problem. And I went back to the cemetery late this afternoon and I said, because they were trying to dictate to us what we could do and how we can do it when we got the right paperwork and the affidavits and all that crap and death certificates. And I wrote them a very stern email. Thank you to ChatGPT. And I said, you guys fucked up. And I didn't use that terminology, but I said, you have made a grave error. And pun engraved, grave error. Because if my dad is in 128 when he should be in 130, I don't know if I could sue for that. But he's in the wrong plot. And furthermore, there's no engraving on his headstone. So he should have his own headstone in 130 all by himself. By the way, the headstone that's there is, not like these like 3 feet ones. It's the regular little one. I don't know why they were so cheap about it, but it wasn't. I didn't pay for it. But it has mom's name and grandma's name. And if they were going to put dad's name, it would be like little tiny underneath there. And I'm like, that's not cool. But it's the wrong plot. He should be next door with his own tombstone. So I said to the cemetery, get your shit together. I want a full report of who is buried where, who is in 128 and who is in 130, and how many are left in 128. How many more spaces are there, whether it's cremation or casket, and how many are in 130 and how many are left in 130. And if you don't want to answer me about 128 because I'm not the owner, that's fine. But tell me which plot my father's in because I own 130. And as far as I'm told, as far as I can see, he's in 128. So get your shit together. Give me the information as to where everybody's buried, and I'll decide whether or not we're going to go ahead and engrave or put a new tombstone in. Because if he's in 130, we're going to put his own tombstone with a name, his full name, proudly. Because right now it's going to be like this. And for those who are listening, it's going to be like 4 inches. I'm pissed. Here's the rant, guys. My parents and my grandparents are buried, and we don't know what plot. And I have the deed to one of them. And they will not give me the deed to the other one because they said I can't prove that I'm related to the man who bought that plot. And I am. I'm the direct oldest grandson of the man who bought that. And there is no other living descendant from my grandfather. My mom was an only child, and then I'm the next. I'm the oldest. And then under me is 3 sisters. Give me the information. I'm not one to like be a litigator and go to lawyers, but I'm thinking that if they don't straighten this out, I'm gonna go talk to I don't know if there's what kind of attorney handles cemetery fuck ups, but I will hire an attorney to find out what's going on. Because if it's wrong and there was somebody put the ashes in the wrong plot or put the I don't know. I don't even I'm so mixed up about who's where. I'm pissed. And I really want an answer from and I really usually name the vendor or the company that I'm ranting about because I want to call them out on it. I am not going to do that for number one, anonymity purposes for my family, but two is I not yet. All right. So if I don't get any results and I end up going to litigation with this, I'll come back and maybe name it. And it really wouldn't make a difference to a lot of you because it's going to be a cemetery somewhere near me, and this is a big country and you're not going to really care. But the people who live near me, and they may want to know that this cemetery might be not very good at putting the bodies in the right place. You've heard stories about how funeral homes fuck up bodies, put them in the wrong caskets or bury them in the back somewhere and when they close the casket they bury an empty casket. All sorts of shenanigans goes on. You've seen the hurt, you've heard the stories, you've seen like on 60 Minutes and I'm now might be living this. How do I know about that any of the bodies are in there? I wasn't there in 1961 and my mother I was there for, she was buried, her ashes were buried in my father's ashes, and I can't tell you whether I witnessed what I saw because I don't remember. Anyway, and I know why I don't remember, but it's a long time ago, and I was grieving, and there's some other circumstances. Anyway, folks, right now, because a lot of this came about because I'm also gonna be doing my will soon. I'm up there where I should have a will. Oh, I will put in my will where I want to be buried, which will be in that plot because I own it. Why buy another plot when I own this one that apparently is empty? Plot 130 is empty. I think. I don't know. So, all right. There you go. You got what you got a good rant this week, folks. And just forewarned, if you got family that is I hate to say this, and I really, but it's the fact of life and the fact of death. If you have family that is nearing the end of life or is being buried shortly, make sure all the paperwork is in order. Because in 10, 20, 30 years, when you need to open up that plot again, you need that paperwork. They will not open up that plot without the right paperwork. Don't just think somebody else will take care of it because in this situation, I had no idea who was taking care of this. And if it wasn't for this mortuary funeral home, I would have never found this deed. I would have never found any of this. It would be a mystery. And I don't know where my grandfather is buried. Okay, I got a phone call. I'm done. Ciao. Thanks.